What is going on, miners, and welcome back to the Hobbyist Miner channel. Well, we are continuing our series on the future of GPU mining, and today I am honored with a brand new guest to the channel. Please welcome Joseph Armeanio, ERGO Executive within the foundation of the ERGO platform. Welcome, Joseph.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So today we're going to have a multitude of different questions that are going to be very GPU miner proof of work focused because let's be honest here, that's my world. That's my channel's world. And I have been chatting with Joseph back and forth on Twitter a little bit here and there over the last few weeks, and we got this scheduled. So I'm super excited to dive in. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Awesome. So let's tiptoe into it. Let's get to know a little bit more about you. Kind of what was your involvement in the crypto scene? Based off of my little research I did on you, it looks like you've been around for quite a while. So give us kind of the rundown, the history.
Sure. So, the idea of unstoppable, self-custodying internet magic money has always
Well said.
because, we live in a society where, the monetary systems, average people have no control. They have very little like future knowledge of what the assumptions are going to be, how things are going to change. And so having, like a protocol hardened global monetary system that is decentralized and no one is, in control of has always fascinated me. So I was, reading, watching Bitcoin, Ripple came about. I was quite fascinated with what they were trying to do initially with Codius, which actually never turned into anything.
Yeah.
But it was kind of like the precursor to smart contracts. Then we had smart contracts, come about largely with Ethereum coming to market. We saw a lot of growth. There's continual research evolution of, concepts, what is possible, privacy. The whole space really fascinates me. So I've kind of been in and out of communities, investing, learning for quite a while.
So back in 2013, at that point in time, what did your involvement look like at that point? Were you a miner? Were you an investor? Did it just trigger your interest? Kind of where were you at that time period back when you got started?
Sure, I was more of an investor, which, for me, if I'm going to invest in something, I want to understand it. And, in crypto, that is a ever-growing rabbit hole. Just based
yes, it is.
Based on research, development, new ideas, new potential, and so I've kind of just followed that. Read, spent a lot of time thinking what is possible here, what makes sense. It's a fascinating space. I came into it with the concept that if we implement these systems right, we can deliver a tremendous amount of value to people around the globe, and I still believe that today.
How did you exactly get involved with ERGO, and when was that? Like, what time period was that? I mean, you don't simply wake up one day, roll over and go, I want to be involved with a crypto, project.
Sure. Sure.
So when did that start for you? What did that look like?
I actually caught on to ERGO pretty early. At that point, I was solo mining it. I had a rig of 1080s mostly. That's
Nice.
no longer the case because hardware got rare and values went up, and I was thinking, wow, this is insane. I can sell for more than I bought this for.
Yep.
Like, that's rarely happens when you're talking about hardware investment, but we had a rare moment in history there, so I took advantage of that. ERGO was small, and so I actually had the ability to converse with Alex directly for a while, and it's something that we share the same principles, and so ultimately, in terms of like what bonds people within the ERGO Foundation, I would say it's common principles more than anything else. So over time, he had asked me to help him out because he was getting quite busy on the development side, and there was a lot of things happening in the back end, and he's a man with two hands, so they're best on the keyboard. So I try to juggle whatever the market threw at him at first that he couldn't handle, and then over time he said, hey, I think we need to formally create an entity so we can have liable counterparties to deal with exchanges. And that's actually what led to kind of the formal ERGO Foundation as an entity itself. Yeah.
I like it. I like it. So for those not familiar, who is Alex and what is his role within the ERGO Foundation?
Sure. So Alex Chirpnoy is the core developer of the ERGO platform.
Okay.
It is a custom blockchain that actually was built on top of tools that he built and designed that were designed to basically take a blockchain, separate it into modular layers and test it. So it was originally a testing tool for playing with blockchain technology. He also built a framework called 𝐓𝐨𝐲'𝐬, which allows you to use cryptography on the application level. So you have the ability to run, the Sigma protocols that ERGO uses, which gives us optional privacy. He's been in the space a long time.
It sounds like a smart guy based off of what you're saying. It's just like,
yeah, he's one of the highest level people in the space that I've met, but he's also very humble. He's somebody that, when in discussing just basically any topic with him, he's very aware of what he doesn't know. And so a lot of the times we'll talk more about what we don't know versus what we do, which, that's kind of the ERGO is relatively conservative in terms of a network, how it's designed. And a large part of that is kind of a hyper focus on what assumptions do we need to make here, and let's not create a liability by getting too confident in something that might not be a good idea.
Okay, great. So I see you got a little mining rig behind you there. So I like that. So that already answers my question there. My question was going to be, are you currently mining? And what is your mining farm or mining singular mining rig look like right now?
Sure. So we recently had a soft fork in ERGO. It was called EIP27, and it was something that miners voted on. We have governance in ERGO that is driven by miners. They have a lot of power in our network.
You hear that, miners? You hear that?
Yeah, they can vote to adjust block size, block fees, storage rewards, and this was kind of a special upgrade. Basically, we created a secondary smart contract from our emission smart contract and used that to prolong the rewards of ERG. Now, that's something that directly influences miners' profitability potentially. So I got in kind of front of the camera and said, I'm not going to mine. I'm going to be neutral. You guys vote. Yeah. I'll tell you the pros. I'll tell you the cons. And so that, that's one of my rigs. It's not even plugged in. Nothing is until that's live. Just because, it's kind of solidarity with the mining community saying, okay, you guys need to decide, because, that's kind of been an issue in our space.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Are like the redheaded stepchildren of the crypto industry, even though.
Awesome. So what GPUs are you running in your farm?
Sure, 6600s. Then I've got some 3060s and 3070s.
Very cool. Awesome. Of course, have to say, as you said, even though they're off, but mining ERGO, right? Of course.
Yeah. Well, every once in a while I'll play around on the test net.
Okay. But very cool.
Until it's we'll be implemented hopefully soon. So then I'll get back online.
Awesome. Exciting. So let's talk a little more about ERGO, and then also talk a little bit more about kind of mining and GPU mining. So where did this name ERGO come from originally? Do you know, or have you heard the story behind it?
Sure. So ERGO is Greek and it means work. And we are a proof of work blockchain. So
very cool.
It basically is a named that way to honor the work that it requires to secure the chain.
Okay. Hey, easy enough, straightforward. There isn't some long story behind it. I like it. So a question gearing things a little more towards miners is, kind of what sets ERGO apart from other popular proof of work coins out there, like Ethereum Classic or Ravencoin or something like Flux?
Sure. ERGO is kind of a unique animal in the crypto space. It's proof of work, which is kind of falling out of fashion for whatever reason. But I don't think that's too big of an issue at all. Now, it is a programmable blockchain. but the programmability of it is based on functional programming. So it gives some really clear layouts in terms of how contracts are designed, right? We took the extended we took the UTXO model and we extended it, creating multiple registers. So if you look at what a smart contract needs to verify, you can go to that smart contract, look at the register, and the information it's basically checking is true. And so if you run a smart contract on ERGO, you'll have a preset of parameters that it will compile, check, and if it returns true, then it executes. If it's false, we have a problem.
Okay. I like it. I like it. Very cool. Good to know.
Well, the primary focus on that was security. It creates really good assumptions to where instead of having all of the logic bundled into one program on chain, which can be confusing to try to sort out what exactly is this going to do, it really lays it out in kind of a step-by-step process.
Okay, very interesting. So talking about other algorithms and coins out there, what are a few things that your team, the ERGO team, has learned from sitting back and looking at projects like Bitcoin and Ethereum as the kind of like, these are the do's and these are the don'ts? Is there anything that really stands out significantly between those two projects where your team's like, yep, we want to do that, or we will not be doing that?
Well, I think probably the first thing that both of them have historically shown is that you need to respect miners, right? Bitcoin's had all kinds of different forks. I think, well over 100 at this point, where you have different mining fights, block size fights, that originated within the mining community. So that's part of why miners have been given governance in ERGO. That's in the protocol. That's not something that the ERGO team can take back, so to speak. And I do think that the same is true in terms of Ethereum. Like, if I look at how DeFi exists today, I think a big part of DeFi on Ethereum basically was driven by miners trying to get through a bear market, in terms of DAI's adoption. And, I think the mining community contributes beyond just security when they're engaged properly. And so I'm hoping that, long term, that's something that we see in the ERGO network.
I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, the ERGO Foundation should be a representative of the miners, because our basically our treasury came from mining rewards.
Okay, that's fascinating. It's so unique how that, like, a totally different approach to some of these other projects out there, which is awesome. So talking about mining, for those not familiar, ERGO exists with it and utilizes that Autolykos algorithm. And I guess a big question we as miners, is, that algorithm is very efficient. Based off of that, why do you think, looking at other projects, and now granted this is all hypothetical and speculation, but why do you think other algorithms have not picked up on more efficient, or I'm sorry, other projects have not picked up on more efficient algorithms like the one? I mean, it seems like a no-brainer to me, especially within the proof of work space.
Sure, it's hard to say. I can't exactly know the intent of everybody else.
Come on.
It is true in terms of, Autolykos is pretty good for anybody that is running infrastructure, because you don't have as much heat created and your power draw is lower.
Yep.
And, heat generally comes with cooling, which comes with extra cost. In terms of like the efficiency of it, that's not really something I talk about too much, because from my perception, any miner that is getting serious about mining is going to try to use all the power coming into the wall. So
100%.
So from that perspective, if I try to say, oh, we are more efficient, it just ignores how miners think, right?
Yep.
Basically, the algorithm is pretty memory intensive. So it hits a memory bottleneck before it hits a core computational bottleneck. And that's why we have a lower power draw.
Got it. Okay. That's great. It's good to know. It's just straight black and white, which I really like. So we'll talk more about that a little bit here in a second, but I wanted to, well, actually, no, we'll jump ahead. Why not? We're going to skip right over the next question. We'll come back to it. So when we're talking about core intensity and memory intensity there, when we as GPU miners are overclocking our GPUs for the ERGO Autolykos algorithm, it's kind of confusing. And where do you recommend GPU miners that are just looking at ERGO for the very first time? Where do you recommend they start with overclocking? And the reason I ask that is like, if you take a stock GPU and you lower the power, your hash rate goes up, and it's like, wait, what? Like it goes against everything we know as GPU miners. So can you kind of give us a little tutorial there, understanding as to overclocking for that Autolykos algorithm and why it behaves the way it does?
Sure. So the first thing I'm going to do is tell everybody that on my Twitter account, pinned in the top tweet, is a community reference guide with multiple different configurations that people have played with. That's always the best place to start, because it's hard to say what specific GPU everybody's running and where the sweet spot is on that one model. And I'll give you the link if you'd like, where you could drop it beneath the video.
Yeah, I absolutely will.
Yeah, basically, I would start playing with the memory. That's going to be what is going to have the biggest effect. Playing around with like the core computation is going to have less of an effect, because that's not where it bottlenecks.
That's good to know. It's fantastic. It's so funny, because like it's so opposite of what we're used to as like as miners, and it's like, why is this acting the way it is? But I think once you start to really just adjust things a little bit at a time, it comes to you. I was just overclocking 580s 2 nights ago, 580s on ERGO, and it's just amazing like how much hash rate you can get for such little watts, which is incredible. Like that's a big one for GPU miners, and that's as we go into this, or already into this bear market, and you're kind of looking at everything as efficient as possible. It's like, great, I'll have the most amount of hash rate for the least amount of watts, and ERGO's answering that just naturally as one of those options out there, which is phenomenal. So continuing down the GPU miner path, and this one might be a little strong, but we as GPU miners definitely feel abandoned, I would say is the right word, by the Ethereum team. Like we really do. GPU miners kind of served their purpose, and the development team benefited from it. So on the flip side, we then see a project like Flux that is super proof of work, dedicated and reliant. Where does ERGO fall between those two extremes, with one super proof of work, super miner focused, and then on the other side, Ethereum, see ya miners, we're out? Where does ERGO kind of fall in that when it comes down to the mindset for miners?
It's all in the name. ERGO literally means work. I mean, if we said, hey, we're going to leave proof of work, we have to rebrand and rename, and I would quit. I would just straight quit. And the reality is,
I love it.
Everyone I know in the foundation would just quit.
Okay, so that is kind of your quote foundation, or your bread and butter, literally exists and operates around miners. That's really what it comes down to.
The reason why we chose proof of work is because it has simple security assumptions that are well studied, they're well understood, and it boils down to incentives. Is there an incentive for a distributed group of actors to participate and point their computational power and pay for their energy? Yeah, when you get into proof of stake, you get into a lot of complexity that the reality is, I would say, we have not even fully understood yet. And it's one of those things that the only thing that will show you what a solid framework is time.
Okay.
That's the only thing that'll prove that. And the reality is, we haven't seen proof of stake long enough to make clear assumptions of what risks are even going to be, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, over the last several weeks, there's been a number of proof of stake projects that definitely have gotten themselves in trouble and not looking, the greatest. And I can entirely understand. It's kind of that next layer that I think you hit spot on, where it's just that proof of stake model has not existed long enough in order to kind of flush that out. Whereas I think you said it correctly, where proof of work, it's been around for some time now. There's a clear understanding. It's very finite, and so it's very pleasing to me as a GPU miner to hear kind of some of the core values behind ERGO are the miners and kind of the value of the miners, and you definitely see it and you hear it definitely in your voice. So moving on to kind of ETHEREUM Merge, we talked about it there, and proof of stake, which is great. I assume your team's really been watching the Ethereum development rather closely, the good and the bads. Do you feel that the development team will hit their mark and move to proof of stake over the next, and this is just speculation, just your thoughts. Do you think they'll actually move to proof of stake over the next few months, or do you think based off of the way it's looking, it might be pushed off even farther?
The reality is we don't follow it that closely because
really? Okay.
It's something that the wolf has been cried too many times.
You're not wrong. You're absolutely not wrong.
And it is true that in terms of an engineering perspective, okay, I have to respect what they're doing. It's incredibly complex. It's like they're trying to take I say they're trying to take a cargo ship that's holding a couple $1 billion worth of value as it's moving through the sea, and they're re-engineering it into a helicopter, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And hopefully they can take off and they don't lose any cargo. And I mean, it is a massive undertaking. So from just the pure technological side of it, I can respect it as an undertaking. I don't understand it personally. I think that having the infrastructure that they've built up and the mining community that they've built up, and just abandoning that really is not something I fully understand, the logic behind, but it wasn't my choice. I wish them well. It would be a problem for our entire market if they don't.
It would,
in some sense. So I can't say I'm hoping that they have any issues, but in terms of their development path, we've kind of just been let them figure that out, and we need to really focus on ours.
Yeah, no, it's very true. Ethereum has very much they are, they're setting the way. So they're affecting the entire ecosystem within crypto, within the crypto scene, and everybody feels the ripple effects of it. And some may argue that some of what's occurring right now is really a direct result of it just kind of being drug on longer and longer. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us within the mining scene too, as much as it's Ethereum's the most profitable for us at this moment, we'd like to just see that Band-Aid ripped off, because we all, you know what I mean? Just kind of, we're ready to move on. As miners, we're ready to move on past that. We're ready to see what's next. And I imagine in your boat too, which kind of leads into my second question here regarding this, is given the merge is right around the corner, well, hopefully. Yeah, that's right. Ish is perfect. How do you see, the ERGO network holding up with kind of an influx of hash rate over a very short period of time? I mean, it's going to be a
wild ride. If I were to tell you that I can predict not only how hash rate is going to migrate, but also how larger macro market trends are going to unplay, I'd just be lying to you. I wish I could give you full details. Now, what does proof of work bring to the table, right? And one thing that I think that is really valuable and often overlooked is proof of work sets a zero market rate for DeFi. Okay. So if I'm trying to build something on a proof of stake chain, and I build a DeFi framework that does not outperform the protocol, I don't see an incentive for people to leave the safety of staking to invest in what I create. Now, if I outperform the protocol, there is an incentive for people that are staking to move beyond staking, but that's potentially a security issue.
Right.
So, having that zero market in my mind says, okay, we can actually build organic frameworks that are over collateralized, that are solid, that are long-term survivable, instead of a lot of the DeFi frameworks that we've been seeing imploding in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So I really think that proof of work offers a better market to start real organic frameworks that, perhaps are not the most capital efficient, but if you're a miner and you're coming into a zero rate market, and you could earn 1%. That's 1% that you didn't have.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's so funny when I hear people like trying to predict what the entire scene will look like
I have
after the
no
merge, because it's like, man, it's like if anybody's telling you they know, you know it's a scam to start with. Like you could.
What is your power price going to be in 6 months? Given the current trend, what is crypto price going to be in 6 months?
Yeah.
I have no idea. There's a ton of unpredictable factors in terms of cost inputs for miners. In terms of, I do think exchanges will adapt, if I'm honest.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's an important part of their business model. You as a miner have to cover costs, right? Which means, unless you have some longer plan in motion to accumulate and hold and then, cover costs in the future, you are a constant liquidity provider to their service as a proof of work miner. Now, as a proof of stake holder, that regular incentive is not there.
Exactly.
So I do think that exchanges are going to figure that out real quick. And they're going to say, hey, proof of work actually benefits us because it's a pretty regular rate of liquidity.
Yeah, because you're going to see that regardless from the miner side to make up for their operating costs and expenses and things like that. So, no, I definitely agree. So, talking about kind of the merge and kind of the influx in hash rate, which will happen with Ergo regardless. Once you take out this massive amount of hash rate and the avenue it's going, it needs to go somewhere. So even if a small portion of it goes over to the Ergo network, does your team have anything specifically designed or technology in place to help deal with all of a sudden from one day to the next a massive amount of hash rate? Or are you confident in the resilience of your network, or kind of where do you guys stand?
Sure. It's going to be a wild time. That's my one prediction, is it's going to be wild. Now,
you're right.
Do we have tools that I think offer unique incentives to miners? Sure. We have one pool that is the first pool that's run by smart contract that's ever been created. That's GitBlock. So basically, their entire mining infrastructure rewards are all on chain, and they've launched a pathway to where projects that are building on top of Ergo can actually launch to miners as though they're their own network or chain. They can set emissions. And that actually might be incredibly valuable. One thing that I guess another thing we can track but really not predict is the legal side of things in our industry and how they're developing. I know that there's quite a few that are looking to Washington, D.C. right now, and the whole game. What's a security? What's a digital asset? How is work involved with that? And one thing that as a proof of work network we can do is kind of hide behind Bitcoin, right?
It's the giant. Yeah,
they have a bigger budget for paying lawyers than we do. And the reality is, if it does come to a fairly distributed token that's backed by a decentralized network, gets some seal of approval, having the ability to launch projects to miners suddenly gives them legal coverage versus what we see today, which is usually the pre-sale ICO airdrop. There's a lot of different things out there that are used to come to market. So if proof of work is viable, I think that is going to be huge on Ergo, because as a miner, not only could you get paid in ERG, but you could potentially invest in the next project that might be a big thing, or just get a extra bonus on top of your block reward.
Oh, that's great, man. This guy just segues right into my questions from one to the next, makes it real easy. So regarding profitability and kind of your network hash rate increase, that network hash rate increase will happen. We know it'll happen for Ergo, without a doubt, it's going to occur. It's not like it's going to go down. How will Ergos kind of handle the block rewards there to maintain profitability for GPU miners? And the reason I bring that up, and you actually touched on it a little bit, which would be great to get more details on that, is kind of one of your how the miners and your proof of work miners are actually helping to vote upon block rewards and things like that. Do you want to give us some more details on that?
Sure. So need to understand that ERGO started from a network of solo miners, right?
Okay.
Which the original Autolykos 1 had a mechanism where in order to mine, you had to basically use your private key instead of your public key. And it's called Autolykos because if you were to link hash rate with me, you would have to show me your private key, which means you might lose your funds, right? And so Autolykos is a Greek legend. It's a character that was a thief. So that's actually what Autolykos means.
Wow.
Now, in terms of a solo mining network, right? That's a little bit different than pooling. It takes different assumptions. And so a lot of the governance that was built into ERGO was based on that kind of initial network that we had, which was all solo miners. So the ability to adjust block rewards, adjust block sizes, basically you would update your config file, and if it cleared a certain threshold, the network would adapt. So it's it started as a democratic system for miners. Now, unfortunately, we have smart contracts, right? And we also have, let's just say, some privacy features that our smart contracts support. So what happened is someone built a smart contract that allowed for pooling without disclosing the
look where we are now.
And so, then it created a whole backlash in our mining community. Do we update and allow pooling? Because, a lot of our ethos was built on solo mining. And, it created enough of a advantage for that one pool that, the miners decided, hey, we all need the same advantage, level the playing field. And so then we, updated via hard fork to Autolykos 2, which is, what we've been running for quite a while now, and it allows pooling. But we also have a thing called storage rent, which is pretty exotic in the space. So a lot of people don't quite wrap their heads around that. But from the assumption of a solo miner, you have to carry the entire chain history, right?
Okay.
On the node that you're mining on top of. And so the assumption there was that the actual chain size is a scarce resource. Like if the chain just takes off in terms of terabytes, you're going to have to carry that, and so is every other miner. So we also we're looking at kind of UTXO dust and how do we create sustainable rewards beyond just the initial emissions. And so the idea there was if coins are inactive on ERGO for 4 years, they're subject to what's called storage rent. And so basically it's kind of interesting how blockchains became free cloud computational services that, from the solo mining perspective, that you're forced to carry.
Yeah, I think that's a big one that most miners don't realize, like swapping over from other algorithms and projects to ERGO is how that works out with like holding of ERGO for long term, saying 4 years or more, or whatever, that exists. I think most miners don't even know that. And this is the first time hearing that for myself, but I would definitely put out there that most people don't even understand that, like like that mechanic, because it's not a normalcy that we see with most proof of work coins, at least to my knowledge.
No, so I mean, it's huge. It really changes the economics in mining if once that is active, because as miners, what happens when the emission reward goes lower and you suddenly have kind of peanuts for the payout? Who knows? I don't think it's sustainable personally. Even in Bitcoin, I think give it, maybe 3, 4, 5 halvings, and we're going to see security issues because it's no longer profitable. And even if it is, the actual security subsidy is continuing to drop
over time,
lower and lower every halving. So what storage rent does is it creates sustainable economics to where even if I hold ERG and I fall over dead today, right? It's a donation to the miners in the future. Eventually that will get taxed and recycled back to the network. And actually, when we were going through our entire, let's say, legal opinion, when I went through like the formal aspect of the ERGO Foundation, that was one thing we needed. That's one of the more interesting things in ERGO that I would say not even Bitcoin can really say in terms of proof of work is ultimately miners have custody of the network. Over enough time, they're going to recycle value. And, in a way, ERG is never lost. It's just, in a waiting period to be kind of taxed and recycled. So it gets away from not your keys, like if I die, it's just lost money and everybody benefits.
Yeah.
It creates more of sustainable mining rewards.
Yeah. All within its own ecosystem from start to finish, which definitely makes sense. So talking about, the algorithm, Autolykos 2, is that algorithm with you guys ASIC resistant?
Yeah, this is the assumption, okay? Autolykos
for now.
Well, Autolykos 2 goes through a period where its memory table expands, right? And that's set in the block reward. So if I built an ASIC for it today, I would have a set period of profitability before the mem table expands and it no longer works.
It has to be updated or changed or in advance.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Awesome. Good to know. Well, yeah, that's great. Because my second part of that question was kind of like, does your team, and let's think more like a proof of stake coming up, the merge coming up, is there anything that your team is doing, or at least in the back of their minds, regarding like, okay, all of a sudden, all this hash rate exists, they want to put it somewhere. There is that chance that we see ASICs or FPGA miners all of a sudden jump on the network after the Ethereum merge. Is there anything that your team is planning for a pivot or adjustment or anything like that? Or no, because of, as you're saying, that memory adjustment kind of naturally exists to counter that?
Yeah, then memory adjustment naturally exists to counter ASICs. It just ruins the profitability of it. In terms of an FPGA, you would have to have one with a really big memory. Do they exist? Yes, but they're really expensive. And currently, there's no block stream. And the reality is, even if I wanted to order one, I think the wait period right now is like a year.
Oh, it's crazy. Who knows what what's going to look like by then,
Yeah, now long term, it's an interesting question long term, because it's like, okay, this February, I think, AMD bought Xilinx for more billions than I have.
Yep.
And who knows what their plans are? The technology that we're using today might not be the same in 5 years. So that's always an unknown in terms of how GPUs will kind of evolve with time. It looks like, the 40 series that's coming, we might see some monster wattage.
Oh my word, insane. It's like, I feel like it doesn't even like, it's very much like, who's your demographic for this? Like, holy cow, like the watts are just like through the roof. It's like, give us the most horsepower you can get and we don't care how many watts it uses.
I think that thing, from what I've read anyway, it's going to pull more watts than my first rig did. And it had 6 cards.
Yeah, you're right. No, you're absolutely right. So moving on from there, we talked a little bit about this earlier when we were talking about exchanges, but a coin like ERGO being listed on more established exchanges always adds legitimacy and value to the project. Very much like you had talked about with proof of work, with giving miners the ability to liquidate when necessary to pay for operating costs and such like that. What steps is your team taking to get ERGO on more well-known exchanges, especially in anticipation for possibly the Ethereum merge and kind of what happens from there? And what does that process look like? For GPU miners, what is, if you're familiar with it, what does it look like to actually get your project on an exchange? So second part of that
actually
question.
A big part of my job. So
perfect, right up the alley.
The right guy. The first thing I would say is I think that the assumption that exchanges always list quality assets is false. And that's a sad thing in our industry. But in my opinion, looking at a lot of the stuff that ends up on exchanges, they have, their business model is they take a cut on listing fees and they take a cut in the middle of every trade, right?
Okay.
And so I think ultimately it breaks down to that
demand
business model, not necessarily quality, because there are a ton of even smaller projects than ERGO that technically are much more viable than others. So in a bear market, which is what we've kind of been experiencing, things actually get better in terms of dealing with exchanges. In a bull market, there's a ton of native assets that like to list. Usually they list quickly, There's minimal technical lift on the exchange side,
Wow.
maximum value extraction in terms of the fees that they can charge.
Yeah.
And it can list, like an ERC20 token in like 2 days of work versus a mainnet is like a mainnet takes an engineer like maybe a month, because there's a lot of things they have to plug together and test. And, it's kind of like built from scratch versus plugging into an existing cookbook that they already have in front of them. So it's difficult. That's actually one thing. If we look at like where could hash rate go, Ethereum Classic and Raven, because they're older, they generally benefit from the exchange situation because
because they're on multiple exchanges already. They've had that time period. This isn't their first bear market. So they've had that opportunity to get on them. So is that something, your job then, which I'm glad I asked this question up your alley, is that something within your crosshairs right now? Like, okay, great. Awesome.
Absolutely. And not just for me, to be honest. The conversation I've been trying to have with exchanges is, listen, you need to look at the inflows that proof of work miners put onto your exchanges and sell regularly, because that liquidity is your revenue. Like every miner is a trader. Every miner is a user. So you need to, really look at how that breaks down in terms of your own profitability. And if you have, this massive chain that's been the primary driver of that liquidity that's no longer creating that miner sell pressure, you need to replace it. Otherwise, you might have a problem.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think it makes sense. It actually is more valuable to these exchanges now, especially with like all the talk of the town with Ethereum moving to proof of stake. I mean, you got to think of the amount of transactions that occur on an exchange right now with Ethereum, or let's say in the past 12 months when things were in a better spot. The amount of transactions per day must have been insane for Ethereum. But now, as time's going on, it's less and less. Well, it is of value to them to start bringing on projects like ERGO and other ones like that, especially as you had said with proof of work. So hopefully then that makes your job easier over the next few months, and we can see that expanded, which is definitely good. What are some of the, for the audience, not really as into ERGO yet before this, what are some of the exchanges out there that ERGO exists on today for some of our miners?
Our biggest driver of liquidity is probably both KuCoin and Gate.io. Now, one thing you'll notice about those is those are not in U.S. markets. Part of the reason why is we needed to create a formal foundation. We needed to get a legal opinion. We needed to go through all of the hoops that it takes to do business in the U.S. market, and that's something we've actually completed. We have, a formal entity. We have a legal opinion that, basically gives their opinion in terms of ERGO as a digital asset versus a security. And that took some time to put together. Now, there's a secondary thing here that is not very popular to talk about, but I don't really mind getting into.
Go for it.
And that has to do with market making, right? To where a lot of exchanges want an entity to hire a market maker to keep liquidity. And I'm not going to say trade with yourself, but kind of trade with yourself to make volumes look good. And the reality is, I am supposed to represent miners, right? And so in my opinion, miners should have a huge say over price based on, whether you're going to hold or sell to market. We've seen kind of the Puel multiple in Bitcoin, which I imagine every proof of work coin has some variation of based on their emissions. Having a project that market makes, and then you're trying to run infrastructure and run your business and be profitable, but you have no impact on price because you have a market maker controlling market prices, is a bad idea in proof of work, in my opinion.
No, I think you're right. It takes away from the actual true value of what you're trying to accomplish, and kind of what your core values are there is injecting that. So no, I agree.
And so if you look at, ERGO relative to, let's say its overall market cap, and then you look at its volume, it's always tiny compared to almost every other project. And that's something exchanges look at, and they're like, hey, wait a second, we're supposed to sit in the middle and make money. And, that's something that conversation I have with them in terms of, well, if I trade with myself, I'm just ending up paying you
Yeah.
the
I
trading
think
fee.
that'll be, unfortunately, I think that'll be sped up pretty quickly here over the next few months if Ethereum does finally pull that trigger, because now it's all of those all of a sudden now you have a huge influx of miners on Ergo or all these other algorithms that are proof of work that are out there, and it's going to be, I think, a wake up call, as you had said, especially for somebody like Ergo. Hopefully that streamlines this and speeds this process up for you to get you on more exchanges.
Most miners, I mean, some of them will sell and cover costs. Some of them will take their profit, reinvest. Other ones will take their profit and they'll play. They'll play around with different coins, build their portfolio in different ways. Every miner is a user. So I think that naturally plugs in really well to exchanges versus in proof of stake. If I can, stake it and then armchair and earn interest, what's my incentive to provide liquidity?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, you're right. You're right. I like it. So let's jump ahead. Let's kind of look into the future a little bit here. So a little birdie told me from the Flux team that Ergo is in their crosshairs as a future parallel asset. Can you give us any details on this, or any ballpark or timelines, or is this all hearsay as of right now?
It's a mixture of hearsay and there's some truth to it. We're looking at different chains to bridge to, and ultimately that's what a parallel asset is it's something that's bridged onto their network. In terms of bridge designs, we actually have a couple. One of them that I'm, more involved with is called the Rosen framework, which one thing we try to do with the ERGO Foundation is we try to create good assumptions, right? Okay. So like if you look at the Oracle framework we've put together, we're going to have the community run it. We're not actually going to be like the business mind. We want to pass that to our developers and our community.
Smart, yeah.
To have them implement it. But instead of point-to-point Oracle data, you have many-to-one, and you have data aggregation and just better security in terms of being exploited. With the bridge framework, we're trying to create a two-layer authentication framework where you have one party that can initiate the transfer, but they can't fully complete it, and then a second party that can't act without the other party's permission, to where you kind of have payment and then settlement, so to speak, in traditional markets. We spend a lot of time going through, what is popular and then what are the wrong assumptions that we feel could be improved upon to really provide security, because ultimately that's what makes or breaks these networks.
Yeah, I mean, no, I think it's great. I mean, I think a project like Flux or other projects that you're looking at, these cross-chain projects, I think it's a great avenue to go, especially as the evolution of proof of work, continues on, and kind of having these cross-chain, integrations, I think is awesome. So some other projects out there have started to look at things like proof of useful work to kind of help set their project apart, or as you had said before, reinforce the kind of support and need for miners. Is there anything in the pipeline for Ergo as any new things for miners? You did just mention one there, but anything else that miners really should be made aware of to say, hey, we got this in the pipeline and we're excited to kind of move forward with it down the road?
I've read a couple of the proof of useful work papers, and the primary assumption they make is that proof of work is a waste of energy. And I disagree with that.
Yeah.
I disagree with that very strongly. So I think it's an interesting thing to watch. I would say our team is watching it. It's okay. So if I have a house, right, and I say I can either rent this commercially or use it as a residence, I have two potential revenue streams, right?
Correct.
With my GPU thing behind me, I could technically do that type of computational work, and there already is a set incentive or reward. So I have to kind of question, okay, is one going to end up subsidizing the other? I don't know. How are they going to line up business partners to say, I'm going to process power for you, or I'm going to use my processing power for you? Who's going to be the one that's creating that? I don't know. There's a lot of, it sounds really good, but there's a lot of unanswered questions in terms of how it would be implemented and then sustainable, and who would run it, and what's the governance. And
Yeah, it's brand new. It's kind of that, like, yeah, I agree. There's a lot of questions around it. I think just because it also hasn't really existed up till now.
Yeah.
It's brand new and blossoming. So yeah, I can understand that. So looking ahead here for Ergo, is there any projects that you kind of would like to kind of announce or at least fill us in on? Like, hey, we got this in the works. Love for people to take a look at it.
Well, we're a community oriented project, right? So I would say that the best place for anybody that's interested in the ERGO network as a whole is to go to a place called Sigmaverse.io, and it's basically a community ran website that has all of the dApps and applications and mining pools and tools and developer tools and NFT marketplace and all of kind of the goodies that are on our network are there. In terms of mining, I think GetBlock.io is certainly an interesting place to start, just because having the ability to mine native tokens or have multiple mining rewards is certainly something that miners tend to enjoy, having a little bit of extra profitability. We have a decentralized exchange up called ERGODEX that sometimes miners can play with. We have a kind of interesting framework called 𝐓𝐨𝐲'𝐬 for miners that allows them to mine to what is called a proxy contract, which basically allows them to swap mine, somewhat similar to what is happening on Flux, but without the same fee structure.
Sure.
Yeah, we have
what are you swapping to then? Like if you're mining for that.
They're actually trying to build it out to where I believe their longer term goal is you could even set like a portfolio parameter to where you want 30% of this asset, 30% of this asset.
Oh, that's cool.
And then you mine, and on the back end, it interacts with the decentralized exchange. And so then you end up kind of mining your portfolio, so to speak. And hopefully once you get, wrapped assets onto the chain, we'll, hopefully see a lot of the major blue chips. It would be neat to see miners saying, hey, I want to mine 50% Bitcoin, this much of this much of this. And, it just kind of automatically happens. We already have seen that with some like, custodial services, but to have it, decentralized and on chain is pretty neat.
Yeah, it's very cool. I mean, it definitely interests me without a doubt. I mean, if all of a sudden you're like, okay, Ethereum's gone, you're taking your entire farm, you're mining on Ergo, utilizing that, but then you have the ability to be like, here's what I want my portfolio to look like. Like, I want to keep 30% of Ergo, and then I want to put, another 40% in Bitcoin and so on and so forth. That's a very cool mentality to go. It also takes away some of the manual management that's required as a miner to be trying to build that out, and it just kind of does it for you. So that's a very cool project. And where is that located again? What's the website for that?
𝐓𝐲𝐲.
Got it.
And actually, awesome. Their primary intent was as a miner, because the developers are miners, which we see that a lot because we're a mining ecosystem. Is he's was running into the issue where if he mined and then swapped, that was taxable.
Yes. Yep.
And so having the ability to mine via smart contract and do it on the back end, is kind of his workaround to say, okay, now I can mine whatever I want that exists on Ergo, and it's not a taxable event.
Yeah, no, it's super smart. I love it. So, you kind of have the stage, kind of speaking directly to GPU miners through my channel. Sure. Let's kind of throw that one question out there. Why should they start looking at mining Ergo today before the Ethereum merge?
Sure. Well, you know what? I can't say that I'm going to encourage any business operator to not chase profitability, right?
Yeah.
Yep. And so in that sense, I'm not going to show something that's against their interest because number one, they're probably not going to listen anyway, right?
True.
I mean, it doesn't make sense. Now, in terms of what does Ergo offer long term, right?
I like it.
We're trying to create, our focus has always been decentralized finance. That's in terms of like Alex's vision with what he wanted to create. How can we create basically frameworks that last? They're survivable.
Okay.
We probably need to over collateralize. We probably need to build in some safeguards. It's probably not initially as sexy as something like 20% APY without doing anything. That kind of stuff has a very short life so far. So we're trying to change that and say, okay, if this is going to exist in 10 years, what do we need to do that it survives multiple bear markets, multiple attacks? You know, it's a different mentality. Now, hopefully for miners, what that means is we can deliver tools that allow you to, number one, potentially increase your rewards, but also have some stability. Like right now, markets are pretty shitty, right?
Just a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. We're seeing more miners that are using our stablecoin. Why? Because it allows them to lock in their profitability when they get it and not potentially, you know, lose to the trend, so to speak. That's a great tool for miners. I'm pretty excited. I think that having storage rent long term is going to really shift the power of liquidity providing to miners, to where you may have the ability in the future where someone, you know, left some of our stable coin in a wallet, they have no ERG, they actually can't pay storage rent. What happens? Well, potentially that could be custodied by a mining pool, right?
Oh, interesting. Okay.
You know, and so if miners over time have the ability to collect assets, they naturally become kind of the market makers of the ecosystem.
Yeah, and naturally.
We've already seen what happens with that in Ethereum. Now they used, you know, a lot of flash loans and, you know, kind of exotic things that were easier to do in an account model than they are in UTXO. But what happened ultimately is it boosted miner revenue. It hardened the system, which brought in more miners, more security. So I think having miners over time take the role of market making in our ecosystem is very valuable.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Joseph, I appreciate you joining me today. I learned a ton of things that I didn't even know existed within the ERGO platform, which is fantastic. I'll put links down below to everyone watching for everything that we talked about today. So if you guys do want to check those out and visit them, I know I have slowly been moving. About half of my farm right now is on ERGO. And I've been moving more and more just in anticipation and of course with just the cost right now. So Joseph, thank you very much for joining. I do appreciate it. Folks at home, if you enjoyed the video, enjoyed the conversation with Joseph, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. And finally, don't forget to subscribe. Take care.